serve. And the meeting's being recorded. I just heard that. Is that you, Tony?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. So we have a lot of common ground with what we're doing on campus, in the national office, in our individual associations. And so PJ and I are here to give you a list of updates on our end of collegiate athletics. And as we are focusing on a return to normal, returning to all the things we love about sports and higher education, we are together in a sense writing a really unique and excellent comeback story for college athletics. The students themselves out there, they're writing their own comeback stories, most notably those students who are about to graduate from high school and who had missed part of or all of their senior year seasons. And they're out there thinking about their future in higher education and keeping a very open mind about the available options they have to get back to playing their sport. These students are looking at enrolling at one of your institutions, at one of the community colleges out there, or they might be looking at an NCAA institution, and some of them might even be planning to do both. And there, of course, are the students on your campuses who are studying, who are looking at what's next for them this coming summer, who are looking to write their next chapter, whether it's to return to your campus for one more semester or academic year, or to transition to an NCAA institution sometime in the near future. Any of these students could reach out to you in 3 months at the end of this semester, could be next week, could be this afternoon even, with questions about their personal future, their educational future, and the future in their sport. And the updates we're going to share with you today will help you prepare for those important conversations that you probably are having, or at least will have soon with these kids when they contact you for advice, for assistance, and the direction they should take on their pathway ahead. Again, my name is Conor Larkin. I'm the Assistant Director of Customer Service at the NCAA Eligibility Center. And joining me today is PJ Hubert, Assistant Director of Academic and Membership Affairs. And for today's agenda, we're going to cover a large spectrum of high-level updates for you. Specifically, I'm going to start talking about in the pre-enrollment space for initial eligibility, including coverage of the new NCAA Division II rules. I'll briefly touch on the COVID-19 automatic waiver and provide some commentary on standardized tests that I think you'll find important, and then review current amateurism-based relief relating to delayed enrollment. And then finally, I'm going to present to you a new 2-year best practices resource published just literally days ago, which is aimed specifically at the compliance administrators on this call and your students on campus. And from there, PJ will provide a review of the seasons of competition waivers and extensions of eligibility, and then talk about some important updates on the topics of Division I recruiting and Division I basketball. He's excellent at that. And so, as most of you know, the NCAA Eligibility Center is charged with the responsibility of certifying both the academic and amateur status of students who are planning to enroll at NCAA Division I or Division II institutions. And while our primary focus is on the high school community and the students and the coaches and the recruiting services out there, we're now turning our attention to incorporate and further developing really our relationship with you and the 2-year community. So I'm proud to say that I serve all of you as the Eligibility Center's liaison for the 2-year community, the larger 2-year community, not just you guys. There's a couple other people out there that I cover as well. And should you ever have any questions, I know some of you are sending me questions in the chat here. I'll get to you at the end. But if you ever have any questions at any time, you can contact me directly at clarkin, that's CLARKIN, at ncaa.org. In fact, many of you have. I recognize some names here. It's been great to just exchange discussions and ideas with you and to help your students when you reach out to me. So it's been a great pleasure so far. With these new Division II updates, so I'm going to get started here. I want you to think about how these Division II rule changes are going to impact you in your work, how it's going to impact your coaches' recruitment strategies, and the great conundrum of how they're going to manage their rosters with all that's going on out there. So with that said, let's jump into these updates. Back in January 2021, the NCAA Division II adopted legislation permitting Division II institutions to immediately provide athletics aid and access to practice to all incoming students, regardless of their initial eligibility status. This legislation becomes effective August 1st of 2021. So starting fall of 2021, students who are enrolling at Division II institutions will be deemed either partial qualifier or final qualifier. This new Division II legislation has effectively eliminated the non-qualifier decision completely. That's gone, it's out of here. And so the baseline decision, the default decision that students would get would be a partial qualifier decision. Students who are deemed partial qualifiers, as you may remember, are permitted to practice and receive an athletic scholarship during their first year of full-time enrollment, assuming the coach, of course, wants to offer it. And to be abundantly clear here, students can practice and receive athletic scholarships at Division II institutions starting this fall, regardless of how strong or poor their high school academic record is. In effect, and the way you can think about this is that the main barrier to practice and receive a scholarship might simply be a Division II institution's admissions office. Now, most students, however, are going to seek out the opportunity to immediately compete upon enrollment. That's just a great part of college athletics, that freshman that gets pulled up and to be a starter or to step in at the last play of the first game or the last game even. And those students are still going to want to, if they want to compete, of course, they're going to need to submit their final high school transcripts to show that they have graduated. So while proof of graduation is not a technical requirement to meet the new partial qualifier baseline status, the Eligibility Center will continue to encourage high schools and prospective student athletes who choose Division II to submit their high school transcripts, if only for the chance that we can render a decision that would permit them to compete. And so that's why I've added that part to this slide here. But again, not a absolute requirement, just something that we are focused on trying to get from these students to help them. For students who meet the Division II final qualifier requirements, those students are going to be permitted to not only accept the scholarship they may have signed and to practice in their first year of full-time enrollment, but they're going to be immediately eligible to compete in their first year. And so in order to meet the temporary Division II certification policies for this upcoming academic year, students are going to need to complete and show through the submission of their transcripts 16 core course units in the Division II distribution, slight distinction from Division I, of course, in their distribution. They need to have a core course GPA of 2.20 or greater, and then finally need to present proof of graduation, and why on the prior slide I had suggested they want to submit that final high school transcript showing that they've graduated. Now, these requirements that you see on the screen are temporary and are so far only applicable to students who are initial enrollees for the fall of 2021 and winter spring of 2022 terms. Beyond this academic year ahead of us, so looking at fall of 2022, students will, as of today, must plan to meet those traditional regulations for Division II final qualifier, unless and until, of course, any additional relief is announced. And so this is primarily going to impact juniors in high school this year. And just so I'm perfectly clear here, the traditional Division II initial eligibility requirements do incorporate test scores and a sliding scale analysis requirement, but for the upcoming academic year, those two elements have been what I would say is temporarily suspended from our certification analysis. So to cover the main point one more time, the main change is that students enrolling at Division II starting this fall will be immediately eligible to practice and receive an athletic scholarship if offered. But there's plenty that hasn't changed for these Division II bound students. They're still going to need to register with the Eligibility Center and create a certification account. They're still going to need to be certified as an amateur in their sport or sports. And then students would, if they want to compete, they would still need to establish that they've met those final qualifier requirements, which would include the submission of their academic records and responses to any tasks that we would assign. One word that I've been stressing maybe a little too much here is the word temporary. And right now, the Eligibility Center is certifying students under a temporary certification relief that we call the COVID-19 automatic waiver. This relief is based on alternative standards. So it's based on the standard legislated requirements that are on the books, but with a few tweaks influenced by the current educational environment. For students enrolling Division I or Division II this fall or next spring, they're going to be immediately eligible to compete if they can meet these alternative standards, which include the following. One, that they've graduated from high school. So the traditional requirements are that they graduate. These alternative standards require proof of graduation. So that part hasn't changed. They need to show that they've earned the 16 core courses. Again, no change from the standard legislation. They just need to make sure that they're meeting the specific distribution requirements for each division. Division one students also will need to meet the 10-7 progression requirement. No change there. And to clarify, the 10-7 progression requirement, for those of you who are not familiar with it, requires students to have 10 core courses completed prior to the start of their senior year, the 7th semester, of which 7 must be in the English, mathematics, and natural or physical science disciplines. And then finally, and this is the slight change here, those students would simply need to have a minimum GPA based on the division. So as I just mentioned, Division 2 would need a 2.2 minimum GPA. For Division 1, they would need a slightly higher GPA at 2.300. The minimum GPA requirement, for those who are familiar with NCAA initial eligibility legislation, these minimum GPA requirements are based on the minimum GPA requirements for competition on the competition sliding scales. But because the test scores and the sliding scale analysis have been removed, we have elected to use these kind of baseline GPA competition requirements for our certifications. For Division 1 bound students, if they are unable to meet the alternative final qualifier standards, maybe they don't meet the 10 and 7 requirement, maybe they have a GPA that's below a 2.3. If they can still demonstrate that they have earned 16 core courses in the Division 1 distribution, and they have at least a 2.0 GPA or up to 2.29, I guess, and they provide proof of graduation, those students may practice, receive athletics aid during their first year, but beyond that, they would basically be deemed final non-qualifiers for Division 1. And since I hope all of you have been taking great notes here, you'll remember that for Division 2, students can immediately practice and receive athletics aid in their first year, regardless of their academic bona fides in high school, even if they are deemed final non-qualifiers for Division 1. Overall, I want to stress that the COVID-19 automatic waiver is what I would call the Eligibility Center's commitment to high school students who, under the current educational constraints, as I'll call them, they're facing challenges with meeting initial eligibility legislation, but are maybe better positioned to meet these alternative standards that I just discussed. But with these alternative standards, there is one question that I get all the time. What about the test scores? Every day, almost every hour, I get an email in my inbox, we get a phone call about, do my students in high school need to take the SAT or ACT? Does my child need to sit for these exams? And first thing this morning, I got an email from a recruiting service out in China wondering what the story is for their clients. So technically, for this upcoming year, students can be cleared to compete without test scores. But while the test scores are excluded from the Division 1 and Division 2 alternative standards analysis under the COVID-19 automatic waivers, I'd say there's still many benefits to students who do take them. And so I continue and maintain the importance of at least attempting to sit for one or more of these exams. One advantage is considerations on the admissions step for enrolling at an institution. While, of course, some higher education institutions have announced that they are going to discontinue assessing test scores for admissions purposes, there are plenty of institutions who are still going to request those test scores, and maybe they would only use it if it helps the students in the admissions process. There are other institutions that absolutely require a test score to be provided to be a part of the admissions application. Off the top of my head, as I understand it today, all public universities in the state of Florida, for students going out that way from your neck of the woods, would have to provide a test score to their admissions office. One other advantage for taking an SAT or ACT, I know students may not want to do that. It's a lot of extra work on top of everything they're dealing with. But one other advantage is that if a student scores high enough on the SAT or ACT, it may help them test out of, let's say, remedial classes that they may have otherwise been required to take upon enrollment. And in some cases, high enough test scores can allow them to test out of introductory level college courses. And this, of course, can help them earn their associate's degree much quicker than without them. or earn their four-year degree, depending if they're going to Division I or Division II. But obviously, this is going to depend on the test scores that they achieve and the institution's own policies. Another advantage to taking an SAT or ACT is scholarship considerations. In some cases, test scores, particularly good ones, they're going to help a student obtain or at least be more competitive for scholarships, whether it be an academic scholarship, where that's more likely the case, or potentially even an athletic scholarship. And then finally, and probably most importantly, if students aren't able to meet the COVID-19 automatic waiver under these alternative standards for the immediate opportunity to compete upon enrollment, the test scores themselves could still play a role in our review under the traditional legislative requirements, since they could still meet the sliding scale when they present the test scores. Outside of that, it may be an element that institution compliance administrators who wish to pursue an IEW, an initial eligibility waiver, that is, it may be a part of that waiver submission. So the test scores do need to be completed prior to full-time enrollment for NCAA eligibility purposes, but that's going to be likely the case for any of what I've mentioned. It's not going to help them to take it after they've been admitted. It's going to help them to have a test score before they get admitted. Certainly going to be the case for scholarships, and in all likelihood, it's going to help for any sort of waiver of remedial courses or course leveling advantages. Now, while there are quite a few academic certification updates that I've gone through, it's, I think, equally important to cover some updates on the amateurism front. And so I'm specifically going to talk about the NCAA's delayed enrollment restrictions and relief related to those restrictions. So if you're wanting to know what's happening on the name, image, likeness map, I'm so sorry if you were thinking that's what I was going to talk about. If you'd like, you can I'd probably recommend watching the oral arguments with the Supreme Court tomorrow at, I think it's, they announced 10 a.m. Eastern on at least C-SPAN. So those of you who are interested in that, check it out. But for the immediately relevant updates for your students and high school students specifically, I just want to discuss first what is delayed enrollment. For both NCAA Division I and Division II, high school students are granted what you may think of as a grace period, which starts from when they graduate high school or when they're expected to graduate high school, and which ends at a time when they need to enroll full-time in college. So here in the United States, that's at the end of grade 12. So generally speaking, if a high school student graduates at the end of 4 years, their grace period would start. If they spend 5 years in high school, however, that grace period still starts at the end of the 4th year because they were expected to graduate at the end of grade 12. How long that grace period lasts is going to depend on the sport the student plays and the division that they're going to participate in. For you, the main thing I think to remember is that all sports except for Division I tennis, the students are going to get a 1-year grace period. And during that 1-year grace period, students are going to do a variety of things. They're going to obviously participate in organized competition. Some students may do that by taking a 5th year in high school, particularly if their state has granted them an extra year of high school eligibility. Not all states do that, but it's certainly possible out there. Other students may graduate and take a year to work. They may play in rec leagues, but whatever the case is, they get that 1-year grace period before they would need to enroll full time. There are some unique exceptions on the screen that you see. Tennis for Division I, those students only get 6 months after they graduate or are expected to graduate. And then I know the 3C2A doesn't sponsor men's ice hockey or skiing, but I did want to add those in here just for your own edification, that those students actually have a deadline of their 21st birthday when they need to be enrolled full time. So it's possible that you have students on campus that may be participating in those sports, even if it's not sponsored at your institution or at your association. Now, once that grace period has elapsed, that 1 year or the 6 months has elapsed, the students would need to immediately enroll full-time at the next opportunity, typically a fall term, which would start, full-time enrollment does start their eligibility clock. If the students don't do this and they continue participating in organized competition in their sport, the eligibility center could penalize them. They would lose potentially 1 season of the 4 seasons they would traditionally start with. So if they're automatically burning a season because of being penalized under the delayed enrollment rules, they compete 2 seasons at the 2-year level. They'd only have 1 season if they try to transfer on to a Division I or Division II institution. In addition to the loss of seasons, students would also need to sit out from competition during their first year, even if they were final qualifiers, even if they meet the alternative standards for final qualifiers. They'd still have to sit out their first year from competition. Not a great thing for some students that have excelled in high school, but have taken too much time after high school graduation to get enrolled. So what this means is that students who graduated in the spring of a particular academic year, they would need to be enrolled full-time by the following fall semester, not the immediately next one, but the following fall semester, with a primary exception being, of course, Division I students who would basically need to be starting mid-year in like January. Now, as most of us know, those students should have, the students who should have enrolled by fall of 2020, but they did not do so for, again, the current environment that we're in. What we hear a lot at the Eligibility Center is for students wanting to protect their health, completely reasonable, completely understandable, or to protect the health of their parents or siblings, or for any reason. It's not an easy decision to make to take extra time off of pursuing a higher education, but many have done so. And so, like the temporary academic relief that the Eligibility Center has granted under the COVID-19 automatic waiver process, we also announced last fall, late last fall, that is, I think in November, that there was going to be additional relief from ongoing participation during this current academic year. And specifically, this is what the relief is. For the students who have not previously enrolled full-time at a collegiate institution and whose legislated grace period concluded prior to or during the 2020-21 academic year, those students may engage or continue to engage in competition during the current academic year without being penalized under the delayed enrollment rules. So they do actually, in this kind of narrow instance, get some extra time to continue in rec leagues if that's still available out there, but before they need to definitely enroll full time. Students whose grace period ended in June of 2020, meaning for most sports, those students would have graduated high school in like May of 2019, May or June of 2019, and they have still not enrolled full time, but are planning to do so in fall of 2021, those students would not be penalized under the delayed enrollment rules for participating in any organized competition in the present academic year, with the exception of Division I tennis. Since those students only have a 6-month grace period, if they graduated on time in May, June of 2019, their 6-month grace period elapsed in December of 2019. And if they did not enroll in the immediately preceding term, that being January of 2020, before all this mess kind of got started, and they continued to compete in organized competition between January and August of 2020, they could still be penalized for any organized competition that they had participated in and that occurred between that time frame, but not for anything that had occurred this current academic year. So just to be clear here, just because a student is participating in organized competition after high school graduation this academic year does not necessarily mean they're going to avoid delayed enrollment penalties, particularly for those students who graduated in May or December of 2019, especially those tennis athletes who still have the 6-month rule on to deal with. Now, with that said, a couple of amateurism reminders for all of you. For your students that you've got who may be wrapping up their studies for an associate's degree this semester and maybe transitioning to an NCAA Division I or II institution this fall, make sure that they've created a certification account with the Eligibility Center. They need to select the sports they're going to participate in on the account and answer all of the sports participation questions that they are asked. They need to indicate their initial full-time enrollment at an NCAA Division I or Division II institution. For most students, it's going to be fall of 2021. Obviously, there's going to be some 424 students out there who might have an earlier enrollment period. They will need to request final amateurism certification prior to initial full-time enrollment. That starts April 1st, so that's, I believe, Thursday. Those students enrolling this fall can request final amateurism certification. And then they would also want to continue tracking on their account for any tasks that we assign to them. And of course, they're going to need to apply for admissions and speak with the athletics compliance office, which is very important at this time because of all the different changes that have occurred. They need to get the compliance office to basically certify their transfer eligibility, their overall continuing eligibility. So what I've talked about is pre-enrollment, initial eligibility, but once they get onto campus, they're going to need to have their continuing eligibility certified by the compliance office. I don't happen to know all the conference rules or the institutional rules, so those may play a factor in what the decision is. And they want to do that as far ahead from enrollment as possible, because there's nothing like finding just a couple days before you go to school that the compliance says you're not going to be eligible if you enroll. So make sure they do that as early as possible, even within the next month if that's even feasible. Now, for those of you who have taken notes on this slide, kudos to you. I applaud your efforts. But as I mentioned, there's a new best practices resource, and it is specifically designed for you who have to assist these students as they transition out to NCAA schools. And this resource was born out of what I would consider a necessity, so that we can together, the NCAA Eligibility Center, the NCAA writ large, and the two-year community can help streamline the pathway for these students to NCAA schools. And this is what this resource looks like. Again, published, as I said earlier, published just a couple days ago. For those who are logged in through their computers, you can go to on.ncaa.com/2 and transfer. If you go to that URL, you'll be able to immediately pull up this document, download it. For those of you who are calling in, we can probably just put this in the Tony, if you could just put that in the chat, that'd be appreciated. The primary focus of this resource is to educate you and your students on the best practices and steps that they're going to need to take ahead of transferring to an NCAA institution. The secondary aim is to, what I would say is help them understand how to interact with the Eligibility Center and their upcoming NCAA institution, their coaches and their compliance staff. As I think most of us know, the student's ability to transfer and compete upon enrollment at an NCAA school is primarily going to be based on whether they're final qualifiers, partial qualifiers, or non-qualifiers, and that's all based on their high school academic records. So the only way we can make that determination on which rules they need to meet is have the students register. If they have not done so already, submit their high school transcripts and respond to any tasks that we assign them. They'll want to go through the tasks and complete them, and if they have any problems, they can, of course, contact the NCAA Eligibility Center for assistance. Our phone number's on there, times are posted. For those of you who have international students, we do know that there's plenty who are enrolled in your association and are going to eventually transfer to NCAA schools. There's a special contact form that they can pursue to get specific help. The international world of academic standards is a little tricky, so we have a specific work group designated just for them to help them with the questions that they may have, maybe involving delayed enrollment or which transcripts they need to submit, translations, things like that. And then finally, at the bottom, there's just some additional recommendations. And so, again, they would need to contact their athletics compliance office at their signing institution or their next NCAA school for a discussion on continuing eligibility, and just the recommendation to continue monitoring their Eligibility Center account. There's also an NCAA transfer guide for two-year transfers. This resource is specific and very clear and very short, easy to read. If you pull up that two-year transfer resource, it's a lot of information, and we don't want to overwhelm someone with their first look at updates to what they need to be doing. So this is why this resource exists. I encourage you to download a copy, save it to your desktop, use it in informational packets for your incoming students, put it on a billboard in your office or even in the athletics department. Or if any of you present it to high schools out there, you can certainly use that in your presentations as well. This resource, like all other NCAA Eligibility Center resources, will receive periodic updates, at least once a year, possibly more, depending on the resource. And that is how we continue to improve the way we communicate with high school administrators, high school athletes, coaches, recruiting services, two-year administrators like you. And so you may want to check back on this resource around this time next year for any possible updates, or even better, you can, and I feel awkward just plugging us here on social media, but you can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. We do post updates to these resources on these sites, and we post other recommendations, reminders, unique hints, tips, tricks, things like that. We have a pretty good social media team, and if you follow along for those accounts, we'd greatly appreciate it. So I will stop here and just let you know that these are all the updates from the NCAA Eligibility Center involving the pre-enrollment topics. And I'm going to hand this over to PJ, who is going to discuss what I think are equally important, if not more important, updates for all of you. So I'm going to get to the next slide, PJ, and I'll let you begin and switch the slides when you'd like me to.
Perfect. Thanks, Connor. Thanks, Tony, for having me. And I know I've probably met some of you in the last couple of years, but if you don't know me, my name is PJ Hubert. I know Connor introduced me a little bit at the beginning, Assistant Director of AMA. I am filling in for Greg Dana today on the seasons of competition waivers and extensions of eligibility. So I know Greg tracks on this very, very closely. He sends his regards. Like Tony said, he's going on campus today to a couple of spots with his daughter. So questions that arise from this, hopefully I think the first few slides are just general updates. I know there's been some questions that Greg has gotten related to what spring 2021 looks like. But I would encourage you to go ahead and put the questions in the chat or send to Tony, and we'll make sure Greg has a nice list of questions upon his return if there's any. So go ahead, Connor. We'll go to this next slide. And I want to talk a little bit about 2020-21 fall and winter sports from a D1 standpoint. So the question there, and some of this is hopefully updates at this point for Division 1, 2, and 3 related to, what if our two-year institution or two-year organization approves a season of competition waiver for fall or winter sports? Does that follow the student athlete who then transfers to a D1 institution at the NCAA level? So NCAA institutions from a D1 standpoint can self-apply season of competition waivers and or extension of eligibility waivers for fall and winter student athletes. All that is based on criteria in what we call the student athlete reinstatement previously approved checklist. And anything that is not there in terms of the criteria for that checklist obviously would have to then become an actual waiver and not something that's automatically kind of grandfathered in. Connor will hit that and go to D2. From a Division II standpoint, non-NCAA student athlete transfers to a Division II school. The season of competition waiver does follow the student athlete. So for the rules and decisions made surrounding the 10 semester, 15 quarter rule, those would follow the student athlete upon transfer. If the organization or association does not provide extensions of eligibility in that regard, there is, and that should say the NCAA Division II institution does have the opportunity to go ahead and seek a waiver via the student athlete reinstatement side of our department. Go ahead and hit that. We'll go to D3. So for Division III, non-NCAA student athlete who transfers to a D3 institution, the season of competition and participation waiver does follow the student athlete. Again, if your institution or association does not, grant extensions of eligibility, there is that opportunity to go ahead and go through the student athlete reinstatement waiver process. So that brings me to the next slide about, and I know this has been lots of questions coming in related to 2021 spring. So as of right now, and as of really last week, the Division I Council had announced that 4 season of competition waivers for D1 spring sports, those would be considered for the institutions that cancel or suspend spring sports seasons. I know Greg has gotten a lot of questions from you guys and coaches related to, Should I hold my student athletes out? What's that mean for those that opt out? At this point, and I know Greg has spoken to some of you, and he can continue to stay in touch here with questions as they come in. But at this point, there's a lot of indications that would say that, the opt-outs at this point, we don't know what the flexibility looks like and what that looks like for transfers in. And I know that probably doesn't sound great given timing and everything. However, I think we'll know a lot more information on those two items about opt-outs and transfers sometime in late April, early May, as council revisits this item and talks a little bit more in depth. One other question I talked to Greg recently in the last few days about, he's gotten a lot of questions from coaches talking about, well, should I just go ahead and hold my student athlete out for the season, even if we're still playing? At this point, as it stands right this moment, I think Greg has shared with quite a few folks that have called him on this issue. The answer that Greg's provided is that, hey, look, that's pretty inconsistent with the premise of what that season looks like in terms of the criteria of being canceled or shortened due to COVID. And that kind of goes back to the opt-out plan, right? I think we would encourage that if the student athlete is ready to go and can play, then they should play. But again, lots of questions surrounding that. We'll know more information on that here in the next month or two. And obviously, we will continue to keep everybody in this group up to date on anything that comes of that. Go ahead, Conor, go to the next one. This is just another quick update as it relates to Division I outside competition and how that affects the season of competition eligibility and waivers. So a two-year college student athlete that participates in outside competition doesn't affect his or her season of competition eligibility, provided that individual has not participated in intercollegiate competition. Okay. So that is the definition right there of straight out of the NCAA Division I bylaw related to what is considered intercollegiate competition. So if your student athlete has triggered and participated in intercollegiate competition, then, possibility here of outside competition may be affecting that season of competition waiver. But if they have not engaged in any outside competition or if they have not participated in any intercollegiate competition, then outside competition would not affect any season of competition eligibility. Go ahead, Conor. All right, so this is kind of leading into my wheelhouse a little bit, getting into the recruiting landscape, getting into the basketball landscape, a couple quick hitter updates. I know I've talked to a few different folks in the two-year college world related to where we're at in the recruiting dead period. So currently we are still in this COVID temporary recruiting dead period. That is set to expire May 31st of 2021. So we're about 2 months out from when that's set to expire. A little timeline or timetable to give you some perspective of what's kind of moving forward and what's next. So, a lot of the conversation from our Division I committees, so our football oversight, our basketball oversight committees, we have one for men's and one for women's. We have a student athlete experience committee, all are weighing in on kind of what's next for the recruiting dead period and what's that look like as we transition into summer and what is usually our big summer recruiting areas in all sports, right? So as of right now, the council is set to meet at the end of April, and we have gathered quite a bit of information and feedback on what a lot of the sport committees want to do right now in terms of, do they want to gradually kind of go from a dead period to a quiet period over the summer months? Or starting June 1, do we just want to hop in and go right back to kind of what our normal recruiting calendars actually look like? That's having prospects on campus, camps, traveling around and going to high school events in June and two-year college events in June, doing the AAU route and college basketball academy route in July, et cetera.
TJ, can I interrupt you for a question?
Absolutely.
There's a question in the chat that may be relevant to what you're talking about right now. It says, so if spring athletes compete in spring 21, then they use a term for Division II, even if it's a short season, correct?
So if they're going to participate in in intercollegiate contests and it's not necessarily shortened or canceled due to any sort of COVID reason, then that's not necessarily an automatic waiver at that point.
Well, our spring sports have been reduced to a 70% maximum number of games to what the normal schedule would be.
Okay.
So I think that's what the person is asking.
Gotcha. Okay.
We have a baseball player that plays in 28 games this year. Did they use a term for Division II?
Absolutely. Sure.
Yeah,
Let's mark that one down, Tony, for Greg, and we can run that one out.
Okay.
So as it relates back to the recruiting conversation, and this kind of transition into my basketball update a little bit. So it's kind of TBD, right? We'll keep you posted on what that looks like as we get into the end of April for the recruiting calendars for each sport. At this point, I think there is a general desire to return to some sort of normalcy, I would say, or what we would consider what we all might think would be a new normal after coming out of the pandemic. So I know from a lot of D1 perspective in terms of out of season activities and summer access activities for basketball and football, we are looking at trying to get back to some sort of normal here. So from a basketball perspective, I know, and I know 3C2A doesn't necessarily have separate June events for basketball coaches to attend, but I know you guys have some sort of season, right, that you guys do play in the summer. So in terms of coaches being able to come to those events the last 2 weeks of June, right now we are still planning on that evaluation period to be normal, and have Division I coaches and D2 coaches be able to go to those events. So from a recruiting standpoint, I know coaches are chomping at the bit to get out there and see guys again and gals to recruit them, because we're coming up on 2 years where a lot of these individuals, these prospects, haven't been seen live. And what we've heard from the coaching communities, and not just basketball, but football and Olympic sports, is we got to see some of these folks in person, because we can always watch them live, or we can watch them via live stream or video and all that stuff, and that's fine and dandy. We can kind of see what they got skill set wise, but it doesn't match what we need to see from an in-person recruiting evaluation standpoint. Just some of the intangible things that coaches look at. So I know they're ready to get back out on the road, and I think from a safety protocol standpoint, with seasons that have gone on from an NCAA standpoint, I think a lot of states and institutions are kind of understanding or grasping, what they need to do from a safety protocol. So to keep everybody healthy. But stay tuned on recruiting updates as they come. I think April is going to be a really big month for us. We will have probably some updated medical documentation and guidance from our medical staff at the NCAA, and kind of some parameters and return to sport guidance, or return to recruiting guidance, really, from Dr. Hainline and his staff. So I know that's coming around the corner here for the spring and into the summer. So I'm happy to take any recruiting or basketball related questions as well.
Well, I'm just going to ask you a question, since everybody's quiet. You mentioned end of April. I got an email on one of my listserv things from the NCAA saying that they were trying to make that announcement, not maybe all the details, but by the 13th.
Yep. So the council meeting, I think, is the 13th and 14th. So yeah, hopefully we do have some guidance coming out of that. But I think everything will be finalized in terms of recruiting calendars and all that, definitely by the end of April. But yes, we should have an update coming out of those council meetings at the middle of the month. And I know that obviously there's a lot of event operators, two-year college associations, high school associations, AAU event operators that are all ready to kind of understand what's going on for summer. And I know from a men's basketball oversight committee perspective and women's basketball oversight committee perspective, if summer events need to be postponed, that conversation and both committees understand that we will hop on the phone very quickly and see if we can't transition some of those events to the fall. That's hypothetical. if we don't get to that point, for returning to a normal summer recruiting calendar. But again, kind of a stay tuned. If any other questions come up, I will put my email in the chat. Tony's got my email as well. Please feel free to email me. And feel free to touch base with Greg on any of the waiver stuff related to the seasons of competition. I know he missed you all and told me to tell you all that hello, and we'll talk soon. So I appreciate the opportunity, Tony and Connor, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, PJ. There is a question in the chat that would go to what Connor was talking about. How does grace period apply to a student that sits out for a year or more, comes to a community college, and then wants to transfer to D1, D2?
Excellent question. Definitely one that's got me on my toes here, because it's one that I haven't answered in a while, but I do have the answer for you. So if a student incurs a delayed enrollment penalty for their sport prior to their full-time enrollment at, let's say, your institution, and then they transfer to an NCAA school, they would carry forward the penalty for the loss of season, but they may not necessarily need to sit out upon enrollment. Historically, I believe that was the case. Institutions were, I believe, requesting all sorts of waivers on that, but new legislation was announced where there is an exception for transfer students. I believe they need to meet some specific academic requirements to avoid that residency requirement upon enrollment at the Division I institution. I believe it is, I'm looking at the bylaw here, it is they'd have to attend a collegiate institution as a full-time student for at least 2 semesters or 3 quarters, excluding a summer term, and satisfactorily complete an average of at least 12 semester or quarter hours of transferable degree credit for each term of full-time attendance. So if you have at least a minimum of 2, you'd have to have at least 24 credits transferring into that, let's say, Division I institution. But if they're at 3 semesters, now we're looking at 36, but the minimum would be technically 24. But that's kind of how that works. It would technically carry forward into the Division I or Division II institution, but they may not necessarily need to sit out a year in residence if they can meet these unique transfer exceptions under the bylaw 12 delayed enrollment rules. There's other exceptions in the legislation. I can definitely dive into the fine details. If we're talking like students who are participating on national or international teams for their home country, there's some exceptions for that may allow them to escape a potential penalty based on the analysis that we do. So certainly helpful to have like specific details, but that's I'm hoping I'm answering the question that you have in your mind here. If not, certainly speak up and let me know. That's kind of how those rules basically operate.
Okay, we've got about 6 minutes left. If we have any further questions from the audience or either of these gentlemen.
One thing I want to pop in real quick, if you think you've got a student who might be impacted by these delayed enrollment rules, you're thinking based on your own assessments that they've gone beyond their grace period, their 1 year, or maybe if they're playing tennis, that 6-month grace period, and they're going off to D1 school, I certainly encourage you to contact me so I can review that with you. You would definitely want to contact the athletics compliance office at the Students Perspective Institution to discuss these matters, because even if they aren't penalized under the NCAA rules, I couldn't say that they wouldn't be penalized under conference level rules. So that's kind of an interesting addition to the mix of the analysis, but certainly want to help you as much as possible and as far in advance as possible of the student's full-time enrollment, so they can make reasonable decisions with their continuing eligibility and how they want to use that up and where at. So
go ahead, Jen.
never hurts to ask.
Yeah. Hi, Connor. Hi, PJ. I was just wondering in regards to a couple of the meetings that Jennifer Cardone and a couple of the other affiliate associations had with the two-year college relations panel in regards to the progress toward degree and some of the requests that we made to the Division I academic cabinet, if anything had come back in terms of possible legislation for the 3C2A and the NJCAA.
Was this, so as I understand it, there's, I think something coming out very soon here. I think I saw an email from Greg last night. I fortunately haven't fully read it myself and I wasn't a part of any of those meetings, but I believe something has at least been decided and communicated out at this point, but it's literally within hours of that being, I think, kind of decided at this point. So I'd have to, I could improvise. I could go back and look it up and do my best here, but I think I'm going to let the association's leadership communicate that to the members for additional discussions, commentary, feedback to Greg, not to me. Well, you can send it to me too, but.
This is Jennifer Cardone. I too was copied on that email. Our request, we're going to figure out how to communicate it, and it needs to be communicated, but they've come up with something, but I'm not sure it's going to please us. I'll just put it that way. It did come in either yesterday or the day before. I can't tell. It's only the second day of the convention and I'm already flabbergasted by all the stuff that we have to do even remotely. So it was not well received by the committee. I'll just put it that way. So I don't think we were expecting it to be well received, but it was worth a shot, but it was denied. So, but then they did come up with something, and I honestly don't remember it completely, and I wouldn't want to go off the cuff and say something that was incorrect. But once we get after the convention, once we get time to touch base with Greg and figure out how to approach, we're going to have a conference call between the 3 community college organizations and Greg sometime, hopefully next week, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, Jennifer, I was going to just say what you just said, Jennifer. I know Greg's tracking on all that and he wants to get everybody on a call here in the next week or so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, time for one last question.
Tony,
Yes.
can I ask Conor one question?
Yeah.
Conor, this is Evans Roderick. When does the NCAA think they might go back to requiring the test score as part of the initial eligibility? Or is that something that's going to be eliminated in the future?
Excellent question, Evan. So as I mentioned earlier, for students enrolling fall of 2022, initial enrollees, so again, thinking of juniors right now, as of today, they'd have to present test scores, meaning they'd have to sit for an SAT or an ACT and meet what has always been the standard legislative requirements. So the 16 core courses, 10 and 7 for Division I, the sliding scale would be a part of that. Right now, there's some ongoing discussions as to whether there's going to be any sort of move to push out the relief for another academic year. I think we had just met with some Division I committee, but I'm not sure where Division II stands on things. They just kind of changed their legislation, so I just don't have any information at that point. But I imagine that we would probably have some information in the well, I think PJ had mentioned that the committees are meeting